Welcome back to the Extra Rep Podcast, guys. I'm Josh.
I'm Liam.
So today, what we're going to talk about is binge eating. Now, obviously, first and foremost, a disclaimer, we are not doctors. This is not medical advice. So this is a few things we've seen, potentially patterns in ourselves or clients, and we just thought we'd address it in a few different ways as to, why potentially people go and binge, in general. So I think a really good place to start, Liam, would be probably the emotional aspect of binge eating. So let's start there and sort of talk about, why the emotion of things, I guess, result in, you eating more food.
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of the times when we are stressed and we've got so many things going on, we look for a quick dopamine hit, which food, and especially delicious, unhealthy and processed food that we shouldn't be eating, gives us that dopamine hit, right? So let's say you've had a really tough day and you've literally felt like you've had no enjoyment that whole day. You've gotten up early, you're tired, your willpower's depleted, you've worked however many hours, someone honked at you in traffic, you had a shit call at work, all these things, right? What's the one thing that you can actually look forward to when you're coming home? For some people, it's a beer in the fridge, or it's a pint of ice cream, or it's leftovers, or there's just a weak moment where they haven't really prioritized food at all and their body realizes like, hey, we've been so stressed, we haven't eaten for like 8 to 12 hours or however long. So they think, all right, I can just have one big meal and just, it could be the golden arch on the way home that sticks out. And then, before you know it, you've ordered something you shouldn't have and you binged.
Going back to dopamine, like with that, like why is that so important from like a neural standpoint of like, in terms of binging, it's like, why does your body crave that dopamine, if that makes sense?
The dopamine is the form of emotional regulation.
Yeah.
So we're in a dopaminergic society. We've mentioned that many times in the podcast, like everything with screens, our phone, everything's accessible at our fingertips. And, that includes Uber Eats apps and all these other things and promos and things that can get delivered straight to your house. I always give the example of the one time someone's DoorDash order was at my door and it was a Monday night and I was looking at the receipt and it was like $40 worth of like pizza and onion rings and all this other stuff. And I was just like, holy shit, like Monday night, someone must have had a tough day to be ordering that.
Yeah, and again, it depends on the person. And I think this goes back to like that sort of like, shame or guilt cycle around certain things. And I think that's one thing where, I've noticed with clients in the past for sure. They're probably very scared to tell me if they've had like a binge eating episode or something, and that they'd rather just like not tell me, and then I can obviously tell with the massive weight spike that if their calories are spot on, but they've gone up by 2 kilos, something's gone on, right? So I think if you find you're someone who tends to do that, what would you say? Like I guess are some strategies you could use to combat that in terms of wanting, to really, I guess, be shamed or just feeling shamed. To be shamed, well, feeling shamed when you go through those sort of binge eating cycles.
Okay, so are we looking at for purely just an emotional standpoint or like tips to actually combat like the binge itself?
I think let's go from an emotional standpoint first and then we'll go from there.
So the emotional standpoint, I would actually just say try and move on as quick as possible. There's no sense like sitting in that guilt or shame. Like, have you heard about the old KFC post-clarity? Like KFC is probably the biggest one that a lot of people have. Like people eat KFC, they're like, this is the greatest thing ever. And instantly, like 3-5 minutes after, they're just like, why did I do that? I hate myself. Yeah. I feel like crap. And I only mention it with KFC just because I've had that feedback. Like people have noticed, they're like, you know what, I'm going to have a little treat. I'm just going to have this KFC. And then, it's just gone haywire. Some people specifically crave KFC when they're hungover. I don't know why. I'm definitely not one of those people. But the exact same thing. It gives them that, like, their dopamine is so depleted from the night before, the shit night's sleep, they're high on alcohol. And then they're like, okay, shit, I need the whatever to pick me up, got the KFC, then straight back into shame. So I would actually say for a lot of people, just move on straight away. Like there's no sense sitting in that guilt and shame. Now we're not touching on, actual disorders and everything here. This is also just a tip and not medical advice. But I would say drink a shit ton of water and go for a walk straight away after. When you go for a walk, and don't bring your phone, by the way, when you go for a walk, that actually helps regulate your dopamine. It helps sort of desensitize you. You get a bit of grounding just from earthing and your feet being flat on the ground. You're not, sensitive to anything. You've got some sunlight, at least if it's sunny outside. So going for like a 30-minute walk right after can just really help reset that and just sort of get your mind back on track.
Yeah, for sure. I think number one, KFC has the worst enjoyment to regret ratio of any food I've ever had in my life.
That's exactly what I was trying to say. Yeah. The enjoyment to regret ratio.
Yeah.
I was going to say the post-nut clarity of food, which some people have mentioned, but yes.
It is literally the worst. Yeah. You have it 5 minutes later, you're like, this is shit. Why did I have it? And number two, obviously, when it goes back to clients, I find it is hard because it's like, someone just inhales a pizza for dinner. It's like, does that mean you've had a binge eating episode? Probably not, right?
Yep.
For a lot of people, who will quote unquote cheat on their diet, it's like, okay, moment of weakness, the best thing you can do, like you mentioned, is just get back on track. Yep. Just get back into your next meal. You're going to find, for a lot of the time, say a client will do it and they'll be like, I feel a bit shit, like moment of, lack of willpower, whatever it is. I'll just go, did you get back onto the plan? Yep, sweet. And I'm like, in 2 days, you won't even remember it happened. And then you'll still be along with that progress. So like I said, it's going to have to be quite severe. And it's, we're not going to go into like a crazy severity of those type of things. But I definitely think that, a lot of people might say like, I've probably got a binge eating disorder, when really it's just, you're super hungry, you might not be structuring your food properly throughout the day. There's all these little different things. And of course, emotional signals help as well. Yep. And they are definitely real triggers. But for a lot of the time, for a lot of my clients anyway, they can just probably get by understanding, if I'm just have a bit more structure around my day and around my nutrition, that's going to get rid of 80-90% of those, binging episodes where they need to have an excessive amount of calories.
Yep. Education, timing, management, all those things can really help, because binging or stress eating, they're pretty much the same thing with a lot of people, because they feel like they go overboard. And a lot of the times when someone's time poor and they're so stressed, they obviously are so burnt out towards the end of the day, they don't even want to think. So they don't want to even think about cooking a big meal or anything like that. They're like, I just want to just grab something quickly. And if they don't understand the caloric density or nutritional value from it, then it can do some damage. But I would argue, just go to sleep and move on.
Yeah, for sure. And it's funny, like you mentioned that in terms of nutrition, like the whole, decision fatigue around that. Because it's like, that's a big thing. Like if you've gone, say you've gone to work, right? Especially if say you're a manager or something, you're managing a team, you probably had to make like 400 or 500 decisions in one day, throughout that 8-hour period. You're making a decision when you're putting your clothes on, brushing your teeth, like they're all little decisions. Some are more conscious or unconscious.
Yep.
But a lot of these people, especially those highly stressed, executive types, will get home, and because they are just that fatigued in terms of a decision, the easiest decision for them is to grab the Uber Eats app or grab takeaway or grab something that's frozen in the fridge like a pie and heat it up, as opposed to being, what can I cook that's a bit more healthier, towards my goals.
Definitely. I don't really have anything more to add on that. I think you nailed that one perfectly. So I guess we can move on to the next topic, which, and in terms of like a nutritional plan and all that stuff with decision making, we look at perfectionism, right? We look at, okay, we've given someone calories or macronutrients, and they think like, if it's not perfect, then whatever goes out the window.
Yeah. And that comes from obviously, like I said, you get to the weekend and, say you're sitting there and your friends go, we want to go out for lunch tomorrow.
Yep.
And all of a sudden you go into that spiral of like, shit, what do I eat? Like my plan's going to get ruined.
Yep.
And so either you'll probably try and, compensate beforehand by not eating breakfast or something, which then might lead you into binging more in that lunchtime meal. Or like you said, you think like, I've had that bad meal, I may as well just keep going.
Yep.
And that's when, probably common for a lot of you guys, and common that's happened to us as well, is that, the weekend, you have something Saturday lunchtime and all of a sudden it's Sunday night and you're like, I've probably consumed like 8,000 to 10,000 calories, no problem, because
Easy.
I don't have any structure around my nutrition, especially on a weekend, and I just can't stop eating.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people, their emotional regulation comes with that weekend. They're like, they hate their 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. They wait for that weekend to just let loose, do whatever they want. And it could be in binging in the form of food. It could be binging Netflix with a combination of food, which then involves no movement at all. Like, there could be so many different things, right? But a lot of times with the emotional regulation patterns there, it's like if you are really struggling in multiple things, food can really become that easy escape, because it's so accessible and ready to us. Like, we really are spoiled here in the Western world. We can get anything that we want.
And one thing I did want to mention was, It comes from breakfast as well, and not eating breakfast specifically, because that's become like a big thing lately. Of,
You mean fasting?
Exactly, some sort of intermittent fast or skip breakfast to save calories. And again, this can work for the right person, right?
Yep.
But when we're talking in terms of like binging and that sort of stuff, if people are going to go and just have nothing for breakfast, and then by the time they get to dinner, they're just, they've had 400 calories all day, they're starving. It is just an absolute recipe for, just a binge-fueled fest. And if they just had, a more controlled breakfast, lunch, and dinner within the calories, they wouldn't be binging in the first place because, like I said, hormones are a bit more regulated or all that sort of thing, and they're not eating as emotionally as to be like, I'm absolutely starving. And then, of course, the body, sends signals to take things out of whack as well. And of course, it goes far beyond that. But I think that's a really interesting one for people who tend to binge at night. A lot of the time, they also seem to be the people that also don't eat breakfast. So I think a high protein and a high fiber breakfast, like yogurts, berries, fruit, protein powder, something like that, I think can be really, really useful to see if that actually helps someone just regulate things during the day and avoid that late night hunger and binge at night.
Definitely. I mean, have you heard of OMAD, 1 meal a day?
Yeah.
There's a lot of promotions about, athletes doing it, and they just fast all day and then they eat things like bags of candy and just all this shit. And you're just like, oh, well, if they can do that, then I'm going to do that. And then, it just sets up a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, especially athletes compared to general population humans.
Literally. Like, there are athletes, like, there was some NFL player in America, I don't remember his name, but he was bragging about how his diet was just bags of candy. And he just eats like once a day.
Yeah. It's bizarre, isn't it? There's something to it. It's like some sugar fasting thing they've been talking about, and it just sounds fucking so dumb. Stupid.
Well, here's the thing, right? And this is getting a little bit off topic, but because it's still relevant, we'll mention it. A lot of the people who are doing this sugar fasting thing and seeing, the health benefits and, the insulin control and then also the muscle retention, guess what? They're all doing anabolics.
Yeah.
Which is where a lot of the other benefits are coming from. Like, if you're not eating protein, you're not going to retain muscle. Doesn't matter how much resistance training you do and how much carbs you eat. If you're eating literally zero protein, you've got no amino acids, like you're not going to repair the broken down cells that you're getting through training. You're going to muscle waste.
Yeah, for sure. And it goes back to, like I said, you fast for a day, you're probably fine. But it's like that, it's that regular, having low amounts of protein for weeks on months on years. And I think that is another massive thing when it comes to binge eating is from a lot of clients I've seen that have had those patterns, like protein is, really low or it is non-existent. So, and fiber as well is up there as well. So if you can think protein and fiber in all of your meals, if you're someone who tends to do, a lot more of that sort of cyclic binge eating, I think that's a really good strategy as well. Of course, we know it goes a lot deeper psychologically, but just from a nutritional standpoint, I think that's really, really useful for people to get more protein, more fiber, try and pair them together in your meals.
But even psychologically and nutritionally, right? Like carbohydrates and fats work on our dopamine receptors. Fats purely from the taste standpoint and the caloric density, because it's 9 calories per gram. Carbohydrates actually sort of shift the dopamine, the serotonin, put our body into more of like a parasympathetic rest and digest state. Whereas protein's thermogenic and it regulates our leptin, which is our satiation hormone. So think about it. Are you ever going to binge eat a whole bunch of like steak and chicken and eggs? No, you eat 4 eggs, you're done. Like you're full. But if you had a pizza, which is just fat and carbs, then like a margarita pizza, which is all fat and carbs, like barely any protein. The protein maybe is in the cheese. You can eat a whole one as an entree. Everyone does that. Same as garlic bread. Just like whole thing of garlic bread could be 800 to 1200 calories, and you could eat that whole thing as an entree easily.
And that's exactly why I go back to like that protein and fiber, because it's like there's nothing wrong with carbs and fats, but for most people, combining carbs and fats together obviously skyrockets the calories, increases the deliciousness, and makes it a lot harder to stay full or satiated.
Exactly.
So it's a really big reason why you need to start prioritizing those things. And that's not to say you can't have carbs and fats together. Of course you can. But I would always say try and pair that and make sure that there's some protein and fiber there, because again, that's probably going to, number one, help you obviously retain more muscle. Number two, you're going to be less hungry. And number three, obviously, you're going to reduce your chance of excessively binging in terms of calories.
Well, we should probably speak on the hunger as the next point. So one thing that a lot of people forget is, yes, hunger is a sign of discomfort. And the first thing we do when we're a little bit uncomfortable, we try and escape it. The one thing that we can do with hunger is food, of course. So when you're on a fat loss plan or you've signed up for a diet or you're making just a change in your lifestyle, hunger is a good thing. It's a signal that you're on the right track. Now, if you're starving, maybe you have either pushed your caloric deficit too far, or you've just been unprepared with all the things we mentioned before about like time management, sleep, all those things, and like your choice of food. And if you're doing OMAD, then straight away you're going from I'm eating 4 meals a day to, you know what, Monday, tomorrow, I'm just gonna eat one meal at 6 p.m. It could be a recipe for disaster. So hunger is not always a bad thing. We just want to touch on that.
Yeah, I think it's good to, like I said, even like I'm sure, in some controlled settings, they probably get people with a binge eating disorder to probably rate their fullness and hunger, on a scale of say 1 to 10 after meals and things like that. And I think, again, for people like that who tend to binge frequently, I think that can be really useful. And then, like I said, going back to the protein and fiber again, but, replacing those with more higher protein and fiber foods, do the test again, see what that's like, see if there's any differences there. Because I'm sure if there are, and I'm sure there will be, that will lead to, again, just better results overall if you're someone who tends to do that. But I want to touch back on the weekend because I think like routine and structure are two massive things, and that's what goes out the window every single weekend for most people. So we're not expecting you guys to have like the same routine you would Monday to Friday, right? Because number one, it's impossible. And number two, it's very difficult to sort of maintain that over the weekend when things are happening. But you want like a slight variation, right? You still want to try and wake up close to the same time. You want to try and eat your meals around the same time. All these things are going to lead to just, like better blood sugar regulation, less hunger, etc. And it's just going to make it much, much easier, to stick to any nutrition plan you're going into as well.
Well, interesting that you mentioned blood sugar regulation. So that's a thing with appetite, right? It could just be a blood sugar crash, like a drop. And if you are someone who's insulin resistant, or you've got some liver or some issues like that around your pancreas producing insulin, or if you're just not moving, so you're not as insulin sensitive, right? Or you're not hydrated, drinking enough water, then that sudden like, oh my God, I'm starving, could literally just be like a 5 to 10 minute signal that like, hey, your blood sugar's a bit low, you need to eat something. And that's why that massive intense cravings goes straight to either sugar, which is mainly carbohydrates, which is why the blood sugar levels, or just something really caloric dense, because you feel like, some people literally mention it, they feel like they're about to die. They're like on the borderline of having like a panic attack. Oh my God, I need to eat something really quick, when it's like, hey, just drink a glass of water, sit down, do some breathing, 5 minutes. You're like, oh wait, I'm actually sweet.
Yeah, and it's really funny you mentioned water, because I was literally just going to mention dehydration. And I think that's another massive thing that people just forget about. Like even just having glass of water 15 minutes before a meal, glass of water after, or just before, after, again, just going to really help with regulating, those hunger signals. And again, I'm sure you guys know the 100 different benefits of water. We're not going to start, naming them off, because again, you need it to live. But again, that's a really big one. A lot of people, when they're really hungry and when they go through binging episodes, are probably really dehydrated as well.
I'd agree. Should we go on to sort of flipping the script that emotional eating actually isn't always bad?
Yeah, I think it's a good way to sort of finish off.
Yeah, I can give you like sort of an example from my standpoint, right? Like if you've, say, worked really hard all week, you've tracked your calories, and you've fit into your nutrition plan that, say, you and I can go to Mr. Nice Guy's Bakery and get one of their donuts, and you can eat that guilt-free, knowing you haven't blown out or anything, and you've planned around it, and you're going to drink water, and you're going to take Pablo for a walk after. It's like, who's to say that that's a bad thing? It's not. And it actually helps you stick and adhere to a diet, knowing that you've got something like that as necessarily a reward system, because that's what it is, right? Yeah, sure, you don't have to have one, but if you've planned and tracked ahead and it fits into your plan, then I actually think it's a really good thing, because we do need to have this relationship with food, a very mutual one of understanding the nutritional standpoint, because otherwise it does lead to things like binge eating disorders and just eating disorders in general.
Yeah, it's really funny because a few times when I first dieted, I used to have my Greek grill on Sunday, and that used to be my that was my mental, cheat meal reset. And, obviously cheat meals and that cop a really bad rap, but for me, it actually worked really, really well, because I just, consume a few less calories Monday through to Saturday. And when things got hard, I'd be like, it's okay. I'll have a shake in the morning.
Something to push you through.
Yeah, shake in the morning, Sunday morning. And I know at lunchtime, I'm going to have that. And then again, massive serving. So it was probably 2,000 calories nearly in itself. But then again, I'd have I barely eat anything in the afternoon. I'd probably have another shake, and then I'd just have a very small dinner. I could barely get through a plate of dinner most of the time, depending on what it was. So it actually really helped me adhere. And this is why it's so different for everyone else, because, I'm sure if like a binge eating specialist that heard about that, they'd be like, oh, he's got an issue. You know what I mean? But
I would have a question. Did you spend all week thinking about that one meal?
Yeah, not really, no.
Not really. Then I wouldn't say you have an issue, right? Yeah. And you actually just proved my point of how one strategy like that can really help you adhere to the plan and progress.
Yeah. And that's the thing. It comes down to the plan, doesn't it? And how you're structuring your nutrition. Like, some people are going to need more, some people are going to need less, more carbs, less fats.
Yep.
Obviously we want to keep protein equal, but just the times you're eating things, when you're going to go out, it's probably why like something like the 5-2 diet's become very popular. Oh, yeah. Where it's, 5 days
two days of fasting.
Yeah, 2 days of fasting and across that. Or they do like 5 days of, pretty low calories, and then 2 days like on the weekend of super high calories, which I think can be useful as well.
Yep.
But again, you've still got to understand the principles behind it. And a lot of people will do a diet like that and just think, oh, well, it means it's a free for all. And it's like, no, there's still going to be a calorie limit on those days. You still need to get your protein in. You still need to be doing the right things. It needs to become a lifestyle, because if it's not, then again, you're just going to chase your tail and keep yo-yoing around.
And I'd argue on those days where you're eating little nutrition, say if it's Monday to Friday, they're also the days majority of people are in the gym and they need to perform. What do they need to perform? Calories.
Yeah. And I think that's the last thing to mention is that, obviously when we go back to binge eating and things like that, that can probably be a thing as well, where if people are like, oh, I'm about to have a meal, or sorry, I'm about to train, then I need a big meal. I need to feel fuller. Yeah. And don't get me wrong, depends on the person and the situation. But if you're 20 kilos overweight, like, you're sweet. Like, you're going to be fine. Have a water, have a coffee, whatever. You'll be sweet. Like, if you miss one meal before you work out, like, it is not going to really affect you whatsoever. Yep. Of course, you don't want to turn it into a regular thing. We still want something there to push us. But yeah, it's going to depend on the person. Don't become one of those people that go, oh, because I missed breakfast, now I can't train, and it send you in that, again, downward spiral as well.
Yeah, I don't actually have anything to add. I think we touched on everything. We're not doctors. We have had our own individual relationships with food to overcome, and we've been in the health space for a combined time of 20 years, so we've got our own understanding of how our own bodies work and what we can and can't eat. Like, we didn't even touch on digestive issues with people, right? But that's another thing. It's like, okay, yeah, actually I do have more to add.
Yeah, cool.
I lied. But with digestive issues, right? Like, yeah, you might be different to someone else of what you can and can't eat, and what's a treat for you might not be a treat for someone else. But if it doesn't aggravate your gut and they eat something that does aggravate their gut, then, it's a win-win, right? So I just wanted to add that in there, because digestive health does play a big part, and a lot of people feel like they miss out on certain things because, gut health takes a lot of time, and, as long as you're with the right practitioner, you're tackling certain issues correctly. But you do get better. Like, for example, you saw on my Instagram story on the weekend, I had a vanilla sliced donut and an almond croissant. And it was amazing, right? But if I was to do that 2-3 years ago when I had gut issues, right, I'd be on the toilet, all day, shitting blood. Like, I couldn't do that. But it took time to repair, and now I can have that. And now that stuff has a healthy relationship with me as well.
I think that's to sort of close off, it's just about developing a healthier relationship with food. Yep. Obviously, when you are dieting, there is some restriction, but you still need to have a good relationship with that. And obviously, if you have some more serious issues in terms of binge eating, of course, we strongly recommend going and seeing some sort of binge eating specialist. But again, feel free to try some of these protocols, see how they go, especially like the hydration, protein, fiber, eating regular meals, all those sort of things. If you're not doing that to start with, then I'd probably start with that. And then obviously, if you're getting some real issues, then obviously going and getting yourself diagnosed and talking with a registered binge eating specialist, and then being able to go from there.
I would add one last thing, get a good night's sleep as well.
Yes, definitely.
Because that'll impact your willpower, your choices, your leptin, your ghrelin, your hormones, your dopamine, your serotonin, all that.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, sleep 8 hours a night as well. All right, guys, thanks for listening in. Again, if you can share this podcast, really helps us grow. We've actually started getting a few more downloads recently, which has been fantastic. And again, if you have any questions or is anything related to the podcast, you can message the podcast at the Extra Rep Podcast on Instagram. Individually, you can message me on Instagram at Action Fitness Nutrition, or Liam at Coach Liam C. Murphy. But until next time, guys, we'll see you in the next podcast.
See you guys.